Several times the Central Bank Digital Currencies, and I'm really curious. I have a specific question about that. But before going to this question, I would like to ask about this debate, because you served as a governor the crucial years of the global financial crisis. So you have a unique knowledge of the global financial crisis from an insider's perspective. And I would like to ask you if you're aware of any country or countries that after the global financial crisis have brought a discussion of the money creation and its alternatives to the public debate through commission, central bank discussions?
No, not at all. Well, myself, I reacted like everybody reacted. When we had the crisis, the idea was the market has failed. Then we have to regulate more the banks. I was member of the Financial Stability Board, and we did in 1.5 years Basel III, and I worked with that because the idea, even the free market liberals of the United States, like Greenspan, and said, well, I was wrong, the market has failed. Well, and I thought that, and I thought that was what we should have is to bail out banks, was totally necessary because if not, and new regulation, increase the guarantee of deposit, and so on and so on. That has been the reaction during 1.5 centuries. When you had a crisis, JP Morgan created the Fed, and you created the lender of last resort and the guarantee of deposit. Then the idea was, as we can have not alternative, we are going to protect more and regulate more bank deposits. Then the opposite of what now I think, that is to allow free market. And then what happens that if you had not the alternative of a safe asset money like CBDC, well, you are forced to do that, because if not, you are going to have crisis. And banking crisis is worse than any other question. Then that's why, the answer is correct to protect banks and regulate banks, and then we don't have competition. Yes, it's right if you don't have alternative, because if you don't have alternative and you don't do that, you are going to have something worse, that is an international crisis, collapse of money, and then terrible. Then nobody thought that. I think that, of course, there were some thinkers along these 2 centuries, David Ricardo, Milton Friedman, Irving Fisher, in Europe, Joseph Huber, some economists of the Austrian school, like Ludwig von Mises, that all said, well, this cannot work, this is awful, this fractional money is awful. But they were very minoritarian. They were very good economists because they saw before anybody at that time. But that era were very economists. The 99% of economists thought that, well, you do not have other alternative. Then what happens? I think that the Bitcoin and the crypto had was a wake-up call, no? Then because I think that they were wrong in the solutions, because they were too radical. They said, we don't need the states, we don't need the state regulate, we don't need the commercial banks, and so on. We don't need intermediaries, they said, no? Well, I think that is not right, because if you have a market, you need intermediaries, different from the banks, but you need intermediaries. If something want to save and invest, another want a loan, you need in the middle, no, an intermediary, and we will see more intermediaries in a liberalized market than now we have that, because now it's certain that it's certain that now it's centralized. The banks decide all the decision of loan. It is not people. It is not people who decide to do. People put the money, and the banks decide that they. And it's terrible because they could decide. They do not decide, for instance, invest in new startups because they are not allowed by the situation. But if you give the people the possibility to invest, probably some of them will lend their money, but others will invest in startups. Because now what we need is investment in capital, not in debt. No, then I mean by that at that time then, and the crypto said that, and then the crypto I think that have a certain idea that this system were too much centralized, and then it need to have a certain liberalization, a reduction. What I think is that I think the state is very good for the monopolies. It's better to have an army that have competition in different armies, as we have in the feudal times, no? Then, and it's very good to have a judiciary that not to allow people to have this. And the money, for me, is a question that the state, because the state is not harming, because what you have to liberalize is the services, the payment services, the lending that is done with that money. No, I didn't see at that time any of that. I thought, and I worked for that. I discovered that after, seeing some economists that started like Kunhoff to talk about the Chicago Plan, John Cochrane, very few, Joseph Hoover and so on, and I read that, and then that's why I propose in my book the idea of launching the CBDC, because it's essential to have a safe asset. If you don't have a safe asset, you have problems.
Lately, the issue of central bank digital currencies is explored by the majority of central banks worldwide. According to the Bank for International Settlements, based on the results of a survey of 81 central banks, 9 out of 10 central banks are exploring central bank digital currencies, and more than half are now developing them or running concrete experiments. Additionally, the BIS itself, through the BIS Innovation Hubs, has central bank digital currencies as one of the main topics of its research and innovation strategy. So, my question is the following. What is a central bank digital currency? Is its financial innovation important for people's lives and businesses? And what changes the central bank digital currency brings in practical terms for all of us?
Well, you are going to have a series of benefits that could be avoid the problems we have now. You are not going to have banking crisis. You are not going to have to see the collapse of money. That is very important, because you are not going to have bubbles based on credit. You are going to see innovation and competition in payments, because you could allow enterprises that are not bank provide service of payments. You don't need to have a deposit associated to a credit. No, you use the CBDC to provide payments, and then you have many. You don't need the taxpayer money to bail out the banks. You don't need to have an institution to provide liquidity to the banks, because everybody could get the liquidity in the markets. Nobody needs a company that provides payment services do not need liquidity if they are backed by central bank digital currency. Then the benefits are enormous. Those related with the stability, you have stability, and those related with competition and innovation. No, then I think that the benefits are enormous. No, it's curious the change of BIS and central banks. When I sent the manuscript of my books, that was in 1918, all central banks were against the CBDC. All. Just China that was starting, Sweden a little, and so on. And then there is a survey that has been done by BIS that was study the speeches of central bankers on CBDCs. And at that time, there were only, 5% of central bankers that talk about this, and all against all saying that was dangerous, that was absurd, and so on. And then now we have seen all this completely changed, 100%, and the work of the BIS is being a work very, very important in supporting and helping the introduction of CBDC. For instance, they have produced some papers showing how the cross-border transfers could be reduced in cost and in time using CBDC. No, they are very favorable to the CBDC. Not yet with the removal of protection of commercial banks, to say the thing. But they have changed on CBDC. And the change for me is to change the idea in CBDC to have a safe asset and removing protections of the bank. That gives you the possibility to a more stable system with competition and innovation. But then the central bank have adopted the first step, that is introducing a sovereign money. And if you ask me 4 years ago, I would say, well, I don't know if I will see that. 10 years, 15 years, and we have seen that. It's incredible, the velocity of change. I don't know how will be the velocity when central banks say we need to remove the protections. Then they are not done that. You have seen the ECB have said, no, we are going to introduce, but we don't want that is too successful. We are going to put limitations. Nobody could use more than 3,000 euros of CBDC and so on. And I understand that because central bankers are very, very afraid about the possibility of collapse of the banks. And that's why I continue to say that if we want to do that, we cannot just put CBDC and remove. No, we need to help banks to change and provide payments and lending in the new system and help them and support them and give money. Why is this? Well, you are saying that you need to protect money. Yes, but that protection is transitory. Because once they are producing and service payments and so on, because they have changed, have divided in something and better prices, well, you don't need to protect anybody. And I think it's a good investment in helping banks to change, because the problem now is that we are protecting banks to do the same that they are doing, and what they are doing is bad. And then that's why we need to help banks, and it's a little paradoxal to stop being banks.
So there's going to be a transition model.
I think so, because if not, we are going to see what are going to see. It's incredible that we are seeing that most countries are going to have, for sure, CBDC. But it's true, for instance, that they are delaying that. That is very bad, because the crypto world is going to profit that opportunity and provide alternatives. And they are introducing limitations and so on and so on. That's bad, no? That's one thing. And they continue to protect the banks. I mean, during the pandemic and during this time and tal, we have seen the ECB providing funds to the bank with negative interest rate, that the calculation of McKinsey has been that has had an effect in increasing the profits of the banks between 4 and 24 billion euros. That is why, because the central bankers and the authorities are very worried, very afraid. And if the banks start to reduce the profits, they run to support them. And it is right. I do not criticize that as far as you have that system. I mean, but if we change the system, you don't need to do that. Then we are in a moment of change. It's very important to have the CBDC, and then what happens with the list of protection and removal, and that is very difficult. I mean, the communist country has employed 40 years or 70 years in being aware that the enormous problems of not using free market. It's incredible. I visited, being Secretary of the State of Commerce of Spain, the Republic, the Democratic Republic of Germany. They had the other Germany with free market, but they continue to have 40 years with an incredible system that was very bad, and not was just a question of, well, communism and so on, but when they thought, they believed that they were, and was a disaster, no? I mean, it's very difficult to change something. It's very difficult.
Sorry for insisting, but if I would like to describe to my mother the CBDC in 1-2 sentences, what would you tell me to present here?
It's the most difficult question. Why? Why? Because, no, for one reason. Normal people cannot see the advantages of CBDC. Why? Because all the protections and privileges of the banks have an effect of anesthesia. You don't see the problems. One of the, if you warranty, if you saw, well, many friends tell me, well, why you are talking about a safe manual? We have safe money. You have the depositor. Which bank has bankrupt during the worst of the crisis? No one. Then why are you? Then the problem is that it's very difficult to see the problem because the protections have an effect of anesthesia. And it's important because that effect of anesthesia it has been well wanted by the insurance deposit. Is, well, forget, no, I'm going to, then the people do not want. Then that's why, I think that we need to have that, and people start to see that is like the banknotes. This is a banknote that do not need protection, do not need taxpayers, and so on. Then, because the benefits are not in the field of the payments are going to be well, good or bad, or because, well, at the beginning, if you don't introduce competition, are going to be more or less the same. Because if there is no competition, there is no innovation. And innovation is very difficult to see by people.
We discussed today all these essential issues that have so far-reaching implications. Do you think that universities, economics, legal, political sciences should include the money creation and the distraction process in their program and in their relations? In other words, do you think that these issues are important enough to include them more in the university lessons?
Well, they are entering very, very small, very slow, but they are entering. You tell me 4 years ago, well, even most of academics say, well, I remember an article, a very good Spanish academic that say, CBDC, no, thanks, no, and so on. Then we are opposing and so on. It's very difficult because I think the academy works with the reality, with what exists. And it is a pity because, in my view, the economists were born, thinking, imagining. Imagine a country that do not have tariffs. And imagine this working, allowing people decide. That is what market, no? And now there is a tendency in academia and in general in economists in not being economists, because for me an economist is something imaginative and with a relation of the market, because the idea is that the market could do many things, not everything, of course. You need the intervention of the state in inequality, climate change, and so on, and many things. But in general, the competition provides many things. Well, now in the democratic, the communist Germany, they have the poor people better provided by food, by many things that you don't have market. No, I mean, and then we have lost this idea of the economist of somebody that imagine, and then they are forced in provide articles with that. The academy do not accept the review articles that are thinking in imagining things and so on. No, that's why. But now we are seeing that. I mean, I have seen many academics like Unhoff, Dirk Nippel, John Cochrane, and so on that are entering, and they are starting more sometimes in the field of law. another that is not economic, the possibilities. Because the economies now, in my view, is a pity because many of them are more social engineers. No, social engineers. What you have, well, we are going to introduce a negative interest rate. Well, but negative interest rate is something that the market will never provide. If I give you a loan to you and so on, we will discuss the interest rate, but we will never would say, no, I want that you give me a loan and you give me every year an amount. That is something created by the state. The negative interest rate will never be produced by market, no? But there are many very good economists like Rogoff and so on that talk about negative interest rate, but it's a question of social engineers. There, people are going to affect that. Then I am seeing that things are changing, and especially are changing, for instance, not just in the academic, but in the central banks. There are many economists of the central bank that are working on these questions and producing. The Bank of England started in 2014 with these extraordinary articles that say the banks are not intermediaries and the commercial banks create money, no? And then if you see all the textbooks of the great economists, you said the theory of the multiplicator, no? Se llama, I don't know in English, no? The multiplier, no? And now you see the different editions, and now that is disappearing and appearing the creation by the commercial banks, no? But of course, it's very slow. It's very slow, no? But I think that economists in central banks in the state and so on are going to be more quick to adapt and study this than the academy, because the academy have a tendency that I understand. That is, I talk about reality, not. It goes that against the idea of Einstein, no, that said, Einstein said, knowledge is good, is necessary, but the most important is imagination.
The next question I have, I know it's not relevant to what we discussed earlier, but it's very tempting to ask. Have you watched the series Casa de Papel, Money Heist?
I saw the two, but no, I didn't see the third one, and I like it very much. It does not have anything to do with the central bank because they mix the printing of money and so on and so on. But I think the movie, the series, I think was very, very interesting and very funny. I like it a lot.
What was your favorite character?
No, I think all art is curious. I think it's one of the best Spanish series of recent Spanish series because it's the actor and actresses are excellent and the plot. I mean, I like it a lot, but it has not anything to do with reality.
Mr. Fernández Ordóñez, I would like to ask you the next question because you have such a great experience and you have dealt in your life with many difficult situations and difficult decisions. So I would like to ask you, do you have any advice to give to the next generation?
Well, I could, but I don't. I don't think could be good. No. No, well, I think what we talk about just in the other question. I think that it's very important, of course, study the reality and so on and so on. But it is very important to think that the things could be different and could be different, and the regulation could be different. I mean, not be completely absorbed by the reality, the current regulation, and so on. I think, of course, not all the time. We have to deal with the problems we have on the table, but we should allow a certain time in thinking that things could be different. It's something that I think has been very good in my life, not just as the governor, but before in the liberalization of the Spanish economy. For instance, when I was Secretary of State's Economy, we liberalized with the first, curiously, with the first government of Felipe González, that was a socialist, and the first time the socialists were, we liberalized many sectors. One of them was the retail, the opening hours of retail stores, that in Europe were in all Europe in Sundays and all some restriction, and then we opened completely, like in the States at that moment, or the rent control. In Spain, they were not any rent contracts because the protections of the renter were terrible, and then we liberalized, and then the results were extremely favorable. In 2 years, we had millions of contracts of rent.
Mr. Fernández Ordóñez, first of all, I would like to thank you again for joining us today to discuss such important issues that affect our lives. Goodbye, everyone. Until next time.